Today I want to talk about rhythm. What is rhythm? Rhythm is a measurement of time, a specific tempo that correlates to a specific vibration or series of vibrations to produce a certain effect. Since humans are conductors and transmitters of energy, and energy is purely vibration, humans are subject to rhythm, whether we are aware of it or not. And because humans are subject to rhythm, it would be wise to mind and pay attention to the natural rhythm of all of creation. Basically, because we are dependent on all of creation and coexist with all of creation, it's a good practice to get into to begin to observe the natural rhythm of things. So when we look in nature, with animals, with plants, with everything, there's no resistance there. There's no resistance to the rhythm of the sun, the rhythm of seasons, the rhythm of the moon, the rhythm of the rotation of Earth. There's only naturally arising phenomena based on observing and respecting that rhythm. You don't see animals and plants waking up at different times of day, eating at different times of day, sleeping at different times of day. They follow the same program over and over again. And humans, once upon a time, were this way as well, outside of physical injuries or serious disturbances. But in modern times, because we are so insulated from nature and we have artificial light and internet and essentially we're overworked, we ignore this rhythm and feed ourselves stories about who and what we are via the ego to override our natural programming. And unfortunately for us, this actually produces a lot of disease and there's a lot of repercussions. And most of these repercussions we're somewhat aware of, but we also tend to have stories about the repercussions and find ways to justify them to ourselves so that we can continue on with the program of disrupting the natural rhythm. And there's no judgment in this. It's perfectly fine to live anyway, and we all have to, we're all subject to, in some ways, the lives that we've constructed for ourselves. But that doesn't mean that we can't at any time change our stories and beliefs so that we fall more in line with the natural rhythm of things. Most people that I meet tend to hold beliefs such as, I'm not a morning person, or I get my most work done late at night or after my kids go to sleep, or, I need to eat 3 meals a day, or I need to eat meals every 3 hours a day, or I just don't get hungry in the morning, I only need to eat once a day, whatever the story is. But the commonality between all these stories is that they're extremely variant. There's not like one set story necessarily. Our stories tend to follow our conditioning and follow our egoic desires. So in demonstrating that to ourselves, we can see, if we look objectively at our lives, that our bodies, the rhythms of our body, tends to follow the thoughts in our mind, the beliefs of our mind. So, one person in one culture and country might think they have to eat certain kinds of foods or at certain times of days in order to be healthy. And then if you look at someone from a completely different culture or different country, those beliefs might be wildly different. Even the sleeping rhythms might be somewhat different, because different parts of the world have different degrees of sunlight and different kinds of seasons. So we can see that the beliefs that we hold culturally or individually greatly affect what kinds of stories we'll tend to tell ourselves about who we are, what kind of person we are, what kind of rhythm we should hold. But nature always tells the same story. There's no variance there. So I find it interesting because we know that we're creatures of ego, and the ego is, holds a lot of resistance to what is in order to override that and develop various characters and ideologies. We know that nature has no resistance. So for me, I feel like it would be a very wise approach to carefully objectively observe the natural rhythm of nature, the natural rhythm of the sun, the natural rhythm of the moon, the rhythm of plants and animals and seasons. And if you're a woman, the female cycles. To observe all of these things objectively and try to find ways to incorporate ourselves into that natural rhythm. And if we're able to do this, it will naturally decrease our own resistance to what is. So, in my view, the best way to go about doing this is to use the thoughts and beliefs and emotions and behaviors that are held in the mind, because the body will follow the mind. So if we believe we are not a morning person, that belief does not lend itself to becoming someone who follows the rhythm of nature in our sleeping cycles. And any of the beliefs we hold about ourselves are not necessarily true. I mean, I would go so far as to say that all of the beliefs that we hold about ourselves are fundamentally not true. They're all just stories, and those stories produce different results that give us the means or justification to continue behaving the way we do. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is the way things are. But in knowing that, we can kind of, let's say, life hack and become someone who is more in line with the natural rhythm by adopting beliefs and therefore reinforcing with thoughts and behaviors that follow nature. So what does that look like? I mean, it's kind of obvious, but the sun rises around here in the summer around 6 a.m. So, ideally you want to be up before the sun rises, about an hour or so before the sun rises. So getting up at 5 a.m. would be kind of an ideal schedule. If you're someone who has to be somewhere at 8 or 9 a.m. for work, that gives you a fair amount of time to kind of like come into yourself and wake up and have time to just relax with your thoughts or empty your mind, meditate, do yoga, exercise, whatever it is you want to do. Waking up just before you have to leave for work, it puts the mind in a very disturbed place, and a lot of times it disrupts your sleeping rhythm because maybe you went to bed late and then you woke up with an alarm and you're kind of out of sorts. If your body naturally finds the rhythm of nature, I mean, I can say personally for myself, I don't even remember the last time I used an alarm. It's been years. I wake up before the sun every day. I mean, when I first started my yogic and meditation practices, based on what I was doing, I might wake up as early as 3 or 3:30 in the morning and as late as 5:30. So at this point, waking up at 5 is just happens on its own. And anybody can do this. It's not a difficult thing. It's just I've invested time into adopting beliefs and adopting stories that lend themselves to my being a morning person and my being someone who gets up early and who takes advantage of the, let's say, gentle, quiet nature of the early morning hours in order to come into myself, rather than being forced or rushed or have to wake up to a loud, obnoxious sound. And like this, the same kind of thing for the afternoon. For the midday time is the high energy time. For the afternoon, it's a little dip in energy and a kind of, relaxing and replenishing, maybe a good time for yoga or just spending 15 minutes, in quietness, just allowing the mind to replenish itself. And then the evening time is time for repose. It's time to settle down, to not be doing anything, to not be working, after dinner, really. There should be no work. It should be time for quiet, time for maybe giving yourself a massage, taking a bath, reading a book, or having light conversation with family members or loved ones. And then bedtime should be about an hour after the sun goes down. So at this time of the year, you should really be in bed by like 9 o'clock so that you can naturally wake up again by 5 a.m. So there's lots of different ways you could go about feeding yourself stories and beliefs that reinforce this kind of rhythm. And I know there are physical practices that could be done. You could just like exercise really hard and exhaust yourself so that you fall asleep earlier. But I think sometimes the physical, I hesitate to say, but kind of like forceful ways of adjusting schedule and rhythm are usually pretty short-lived. Whereas I think adopting belief systems and therefore adopting thoughts and emotions which reinforce a change in rhythm are a lot more long-lasting, a lot more sustainable. And the body will always follow the mind. It's just far easier to work with the mind and its belief systems than it is to force your body into certain things, because usually if the belief systems aren't changed and the thoughts and patterns aren't changed, that will have like a backlash and you'll end up falling back into the same rhythm that you had before. So I think that if I were to say, outside of what I always say, which is the most important thing you can do to change your life is to start a meditation practice. That probably the most important thing we can do to better our health and wellness is to be aware of rhythm and abide by the natural rhythm. And in my opinion, the easiest way to do this is to change our beliefs about who we are, change our beliefs about what we need to be happy and healthy and well. And the added bonus here is that once we start to recognize that our beliefs and thoughts and emotions are what are reinforcing who we think we are in regards to rhythm, so we can start to see that that's kind of the case with everything in our life. That the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what kind of person we are and what we need and what we want, our body follows those beliefs. So in doing this with rhythm, we can kind of gain a little bit of ground to begin doing this with all areas of our life, about who we think we are, what we need, and what we believe. And we can then begin to create characters or belief systems that are more in line with who we really want to be and what we really know is good for us, what is beneficial, what will yield long-term happiness rather than short-term shallow payoffs. So I hope this video motivates you to try to at least begin to let go of the belief systems you have about what kind of person you are, and also to observe nature and observe the natural rhythm of cycles and see where you can adjust your life to fall in line with those rhythms so that your life and your energy can become more of an effortless process rather than a bunch of resistance and force that keeps you stuck in a guilt, shame cycle. Because none of that is necessary and none of it is true. And it can all be moved, it can all be modified. You're essentially your own set of Legos and you can build whatever you want and you can reconstruct whatever you want. So don't get too attached.